Hi everyone, this is Ashley with Marshflower Studio. In this video, I'm going to be showing you guys my first creative art journal. Some of the things that I did in this book, some of the techniques, some of the ideas I played around with. If you like the video, make sure you hit the thumbs up button and give me a like and subscribe so you can see other videos as they come out. So on the cover of this particular art journal, I found a picture in a magazine that I just thought was hilarious. So you have all these little toads sitting on these little boards, and they've all got clothespins keeping their mouths shut. So when I started journaling, I was teaching art, and I was working with high school students. As most people know and understand, high school students have a really hard time containing all their thoughts. So the fact that I was teaching people that had a hard time keeping things to themselves, and then the frogs with the clothespins so they couldn't make noises, I just found really amusing. The magazine, however, the paper of it was pretty thin, so I ended up scanning it and then printing out this version on photo paper, which I then glued to the front of my book. The words on the front of this book are excuse me, are a technique that I will demonstrate in another video, but essentially you print out the words that you want to use, and it needs to be on a toner printer. Okay, not an inkjet, a toner. My allergies are getting the best of me today. So when you print it from a toner printer, the ink really sits on top of the paper instead of soaking into the paper. And once you have that, you can put clear packing tape right over top of the words. You get the back of the paper wet, and then you can remove all of the paper and the ink will still stay stuck to the tape. So then you can tape it on top of anything and be able to see through it. Now, as you can tell, you can still see that there's tape here. But for the purposes of something like an art journal, we really don't care, right? So you can do this kind of thing and put it over top of a picture so you can still see the picture behind the words. There's lots of different ways you can use this. It does work on some magazine prints, but I would test another image from the magazine or just part of the page before just kind of going for it, because on some of them it won't work and then you lose your picture, where you could just use the actual magazine page if the tape transfer doesn't work. But we'll get into that a little bit more. So this particular journal started off as part of a lesson for my students, a place for them to practice, to learn from their mistakes, to try out different techniques, and kind of give them a place to get some of their emotions out of their head, right? We had several days set aside throughout the semester where I would allow my students to just work in their book, and they always had their books available when they finished a project early or they had to wait on something to dry before they could move on to the next part. they had these that they could work on and add to. They also kept notes for all of the projects that we were working on. So even if they didn't have the written directions still in front of them on the board or on the projector, they would have it written in their book they could refer back to. So there's another tape transfer here. Whenever we did these art journal days, I would make sure that lots of different stuff was out. So markers, paints, stamps, ink, tape, magazines, all kinds of stuff. So they could really kind of pick and choose what they felt drawn to. And a lot of the pages in the beginning especially are really random, and some of the two different sides don't go together. But like I said, it's a place where you could kind of find some ideas and then kind of see where they took you. So on this one, I've got this little printed out thing about the butterfly effect tucked in here. Got a couple different things down here with some stuff written on them. I've got the pictures of the butterflies, and on top of that, I felt like I needed a little bit of texture, so I put one of those overhead transparencies on top and drew with my pen a ton of little circles. And it was kind of one of those pages where I wish I hadn't done the transparency part, looking back on it. But it was a way to show my students some different techniques that they could use, and the fact that it didn't just have to be a plain piece of plastic. You can layer things to create different looks. So, like I said, some of the pages are kind of random. Some of them are just where I was absolutely bored out of my mind. And sometimes, you know, my students would say, oh, do this in there, or hey, use this, or hey, draw that. And that's kind of how some of these ended up becoming. And especially with this first one, I did a lot of little things where I had these extra mini pages kind of going on. And some of them were tied to whatever art project they were working on, as far as like mixing oil pastels, using their fingers to smudge it so that it would actually blend. This is a giant tape transfer. And the one thing that we found with pages like this one, anywhere that there is ink stuck to the page, or stuck to the tape, sorry, it will no longer stick to the paper. So over here where there was no ink in these words, that part stuck. But everything else did not. So I had to come back and glue it in kind of with a glue stick. Give it some sticky back. That was for a wedding. I've got all of my students from that year. Usually I get them to sign a page in my book. This is one of the pages where some of my students were learning about some different cultures and learning about the way things are done in other parts of the world. And they were finding some of these articles in National Geographic and challenging me to create a journal page with it. So this was my kind of attempt at doing a similar pattern to the one that is behind these women here. And then talking about what the article says, what this image kind of means to me, and kind of showing the kids that there's different things they can do. So during this time, we were also hunting for our first house. And these were some of the ones we looked at, some of the notes I wrote down about what we liked and didn't like. We have another one where I've done kind of the magazine picture that I just thought was really pretty. Kind of colored in the background so it would sort of be similar. And then I did the writing on top of one of those clear transparency papers. I guess that shows how old I am, using transparencies in my books. So again, we have something that I thought was particularly interesting visually, kind of come up with a page kind of around that image, and then thoughts about, on this page, natural selection. We have beach trip page, just colorful and fun. Sometimes I would choose pages just based on a particular set of colors that I happened to pull out that day, and then figuring out what those colors kind of said versus starting with an idea. So this one is a fun page. Again, magazine article about all these cave paintings where the people have kind of frozen their handprints in time. And then I took my handprint, and I was wearing a glove when I did this, but I sprayed all around my hand and then sprinkled all of this chalk pastel dust around the paper so that it would stick to the adhesive that I sprayed on there. So kind of imitating that look just in my book. We have more circles. This was something that I used to do whenever I had meetings that didn't really have anything to do with me, and I had to sit there anyway. We had presidential race and some of my thoughts about the candidates. We did a couple of different pages where we had envelopes and some things that we kind of tucked away in the envelope so that we could have some thoughtful discussions with ourselves without just kind of leaving it open for everybody to see on a page. And again, sometimes it was just experimenting with color, drawing, ideas, more wedding stuff. We have pretty dogwoods. And again, this is just where I took a photo and printed it out. Kind of did my own little version on the opposite page. This one is done with crayon and watercolor paint. We have, we're going to skip that page. One of the projects that I used to do is printmaking. So we would create these prints and cut them out. And then some of the ones that I did ended up getting stuck in here. Kind of creating your own stamps. I also taught photography. So we did pinhole cameras. That is, the whole photography in the darkroom thing is an experience. I enjoyed it when I could get things to work, but I wasn't the best at it. Digital photography was definitely where I had more strength. But I still taught darkroom photography, the basics of what to do, how to do it, all that kind of stuff. So some of that is in here. We have more just kind of bored creating designs. Occasionally we do a little cutout in our page using different color inks to kind of go with your page. Is something that you can choose to do. In this book in particular, there's definitely a lot more kind of magazine images, and then the rest of the page is kind of built off of that. A lot of my later books don't have near as many magazine and photo things. I got a cute little face. So this is actually a picture of my little girl. And I found this page in the magazine and just thought it was super cute for her to be like looking out through it. We have a poem that one of my students wrote for me, and then I kind of created this little image over here to go with it. He made this little flower thing, but then all of the brown part of this page is masking tape, and then I went over top of it with a brown marker so it would kind of stain the tape darker and give it a little bit more of a texture. I have more of my students. We have, this is all color pencil drawing in here. This is some of the Prismacolor color pencils, and this book is from 2008. So now that it's 2023, you can see it's going to hold up, it's going to last, it's going to look pretty and vibrant for a long time. And then I cut a little window in here so that you can see that cute little dog poking his nose through. This is one of the pages where I just glued the tissue paper to the page in the book. And then once it's dry, then I went back and added another layer over the top with the glue so that it wouldn't bleed onto anything else, because that glue layer being on the top will kind of seal in all the color and then it won't go anywhere. So we've got some pages where I used some texture plates and did some rubbings. This is again a tape transfer, so you can see this kind of cutout of the little rainbow thing going up through the picture. This one I had kind of just colored a whole bunch of marker on this page, and I didn't like the way it looked. It was a little too bright and a little too just whoa. So I ended up scrunching up just a piece of white tissue paper over the top and gluing that down, and that kind of subdued it enough that I could write over the top of it pretty easily. So more photos that I took, and then just kind of some page design around it. This was one of the projects that we used to do. You color a piece of paper with crayon, pretty heavy. It's got to be thick. And then you paint over the top of that with India ink. And the India ink will stick to the waxy crayon. And once it's dry, you can come back with, I used to use paper clips. And I would tape the paper clip to a pencil, and you could kind of scratch out any designs or words you wanted to, and you can see the crayon underneath. So that's a cool little fun thing to do. I took a trip to Blowing Rock and then put some of the stuff in here from that, some of the photos and information. We've got fun little fish. I think it was Dr. Seuss week when I did this one. We've got some more just different random pictures that I felt kind of went together. And then the page in the background, I colored with a whole bunch of markers. And then any of the white space that was left, I came back and filled in with black. So it kind of gives you this weird, textury kind of situation going on. So this is another one where I used some crayon and then watercolor paint over the top. It gives you some nice color going through here. We've got magazine and photos. This was where I was keeping some notes about some things we had to meet about. This one is crayon and then black watercolor paint over the top. So similar to the other page, but it gives you a little bit different effect. And then this page is the same over here. So this is another one of the tape transfers, and the ink is stuck to the whole thing. So on this side, I've got the edge of it taped completely down, but you can see on the back where some of the paper didn't completely wash off because it is soaked into the ink, or the ink is soaked into the paper. So we have more just designs and photos. So I drew this zebra and colored it in, and then as I was coloring it in, one of my students walked up with this piece of toilet paper they had been using to smudge and wipe with on their project, and they were like, gosh, would you put this in there with that zebra? I think it would just look really cool. So I put it in here, kind of wrote this little thing over the top, and I think it's nice. So this one, I drew out a design with pencil. I went over the design with regular glue, and then once the glue is dry, you can come back in with chalk pastels and kind of add in the color and smudge it around, and it won't stick to the glue. So you can kind of have that edge there in between all of your colors, and it gives you some cool little kind of textures there. If this is something you want to try, I'd highly recommend it. It's awesome, it's fun. But I would recommend not using a pencil to kind of draw your lines out first, because I don't know if you can see as well on the video, but there are places where you can see the pencil lines underneath the glue, and I kind of wish you couldn't. So this was a learning curve for me. We've got some more information. This was one of my pages where I was super bored again. All those little squiggles. Different places we were looking at taking students for some art history tours. We've got some clovers down here on the bottom. This was a page I never actually got around to finishing, but using greeting cards or thank you cards in your book, and then kind of writing different things or putting different pictures behind each one is something that you can do. This was another page where I was kind of just trying to fill the space and quite honestly finish the book. So we'll keep going without discussing every teeny tiny little detail. Oh, it's my wedding picture. This one again is the Prismacolor color pencils, and this little thing up here is a coffee filter. So I wet it, smoothed it out, drew the flower on there, cut out the edges where it needed to be cut, and I thought it was pretty cool. This is all fingerprints over here. Another just design, magic carpet maybe. We have our Earth Day design. Sometimes trying to convince teenagers that it doesn't have to be perfect. You just have to start. Can be hard, for sure. So this one, I actually found this fabric in one of the cabinets in the classroom that I had kind of taken over. And it reminded me very much of like Cleopatra. So I drew this pretty scarab beetle and colored it over with the gold. And I really liked that kind of image there. Got all kinds of little fun things, some random yarn and thread from one of our fabric projects turned into a flower. This was something that one of my students made and gave me to stick in here somehow, so this was the page I created for that. Sometimes we're just mimicking different shapes and patterns we see. I would challenge them to find a picture like this and then figure out how they can recreate it so that you can still see that they're similar, but not, you know, copying every little detail of this person. Again, some nice color pencil. Some of these articles I don't even remember reading at this point because it's been a while. This was a page that also never got finished. And sometimes that's okay. I moved on to other books, other classes, other years, and there's probably a couple pages in several books where this was kind of all that happened. And then I never got back to kind of writing about it or creating anything else to go with it. I think this was one of the synchronized swimmer teams from the Olympics that had recently been. We have little shopping bags from places we've been. This is actually like plastic wrap, and then I used crayon to add the color to it, and it worked a lot better than I thought it would, quite honestly. We have another coffee filter flower here. Again, kind of just mimicking the image we have on this side. We have our World Wildlife Fund. I used to have several shirts that I just absolutely loved. But being an art teacher, you tend to ruin clothes. And some of these images just are about the social climate, things that are popular, current events, things like that. And sometimes I look back on these and I'm just kind of like, why did I do that? So this is one of those like ink blot kind of deals. You put the paint on there, you turn a page, you smooth it, smush it, all that good stuff, and then you open it back up so that it can dry. And a lot of the times I just really liked how these colors turned out when it was done. And think this next one, after being shut all these years, stuck together. I don't want to rip it right now. But all those doors kind of open through those pages for this and the very back. So I think this was kind of funny. You've got the man kind of pointing to the moon like he's twirling it on his finger like one of the famous basketball players. But parting shot, end of the book, you know, keep in touch down here at the bottom seemed fitting. And on the back, I have one of my angel wing stencils. And you can see from years of being carted around, carried around, kept on a shelf. Things are going to get messed up. They're going to get wet. They're going to get scratched. They're going to get dented. It's okay. It's all about your journey in making it and not necessarily about the end product with this kind of experience. So for my new book, there's a couple of things that I wanted to kind of touch on. The first one is that getting a piece of paper, a piece of cardboard, not the like thick corrugated cardboard, like the cereal box kind of cardboard. Sometimes these come in packs of paper. I think this one came with some like journal covers that I ordered. Having something like this will come in handy if you need to cut through a page. You can put this behind so that you're not cutting through multiple pages. Also, when you're doing pages like this one, if I had not done this page yet, any writing that I would do on this side or anything wet that I did on this side, especially the writing part, anywhere that there is color pencil here, if I press on it from the back side, it will transfer some of that color pencil to any area that's white. So then I would end up having parts of words kind of over here. And in some cases it would transfer this color pencil to this side. That's not something I want to do with this page. So whenever I'm working on this next page, I still haven't written anything up here. But when I do, having this piece behind that area is going to make it so that I don't end up messing up that page. So it can be a regular piece of printer paper. It can be something like this cardboard to stick in between if you're using things that might transfer to the other page. If you're cutting, definitely use a piece of cardboard. If you're fancy, you can also get these little small cutting mats that you can stick under a page to cut with an X-Acto knife, and that works too. After being an art teacher for 15 years, I have lots of random arts and crafts supplies laying around because I would make samples at home instead of staying at the school until the wee hours trying to make examples for projects. So I've got tons of this kind of stuff laying around, but I've always got a need for pieces of construction board, tag board, whatever you want to call it. So in this video, I'm going to start on a new page, and I don't know where this page is going to go just yet, but I know that I don't want any white paper showing. So I've got some watercolor paints. Yay! All the pretty paint colors make me happy. And some water. And let me use this brush. Like I said, I've got lots of different art supplies laying around. I've got a whole bunch of brushes and paint, and whew, if anybody knew how many art supplies I actually had, it would be scary. Let's see. This is one of my favorite colors. So I got my brush wet. I'm gonna get some paint. And then we're just gonna make a little swoosh. Come back to this side. And I'm just gonna keep kind of mixing some of these different colors from my palette. Some areas are lighter, some are darker. I don't remember what brand this set is, but it's one I know I've seen in a couple different art stores. So it's not your like crazy, super high-end, expensive watercolor set. It is a little bit of a step up from you know, the ones they tell you to buy when you're going to school. There are some art supplies that are definitely meant for kids, although I kind of always felt bad giving things that I knew weren't going to work super well to the smaller kids, because they could see that it was not turning out the way they hoped, and that always kind of made me feel bad. So I would try to buy some of this stuff that was a little bit better, but still within a price range that I could justify. Shoop. There's a couple different techniques that you can do when you are using watercolor paints. One of the ones that I use from time to time is wetting the paper before I start adding color, and it just kind of helps the colors blend together. In this particular instance, in this book, I don't want my paper to get too wet, because then it'll get all the other pages wet, and when paper gets wet, it tends to crinkle and wrinkle, and I don't want all of my pages to be that way. So but there's no real rhyme or reason, just kind of filling in some different areas with some different colors. I do try to stay with a warmer or a cooler palette. So right now I'm definitely doing more cooler, but since I've used some of the reds, I'm not going to use any green or yellow because I have these purples, and I don't want to end up with any brown or gray areas. So I'm going to stick to the purpley red, pink kind of range, and then those like blues and teals. Let's get some more pinks. And I do mix some of the colors together as I go. and they get mixed on my tray just from using the same brush, but that's okay. Boop. And I'm not blotting any of the extra water out of my brush. Mostly because this is not a watercolor brush that I'm using. It's really meant more for acrylic painting, so it's not holding as much water as a watercolor brush would. This kind of reminds me of a flamingo. So I might turn this into a flamingo. I like flamingos, but my oldest, every time I see a flamingo when we're out somewhere, I point it out to her. And at this point, she's like, "Oh my God, Mom! Stop pointing out all the flamingos." I keep telling her that I'm going to fill our front yard with the flamingos one year. I haven't yet. Maybe this year. Do for like Halloween or New Year's. Just fill our entire front yard with flamingos. So, I've just got water on my brush now. I'm going to kind of go back over some of these areas in between colors, because as you can see, it's kind of blending them together just a little bit. It's not going to completely blend everything, but some of those areas where the overlap is a little harsh, it will soften those up. Okay. So I'm gonna let this dry, and as you can see, let me slide this down just a little. I got some of the paint on my paper underneath. That's also, this little piece of paper cardboard will help you not to get paint or dye from the edges of your picture kind of bleeding down onto other pages. So keep that in mind. I did used to have a bigger one of these little board things that would stick out about an inch all the way around my page, so that I could just kind of stick it in there, and then no matter where I went off the edge, I was covered. I don't know where that is now though. So like I said, I'm gonna let this dry. Once this side is dry, I'll come back and do this side later, and then I will figure out what I'm gonna put on top of this. This might end up really being a flamingo. So don't be surprised if you see that. If there's anything you would like to see me demonstrate or try in the next video, pop it in the comments. I kind of went over a lot of things with that other art journal that I showed you, but if there's anything in there that kind of caught your interest and you want to see me do a demonstration of it, just let me know, and I'd be more than happy to do that on the next couple of pages. I'm always down for suggestions and ideas, so throw them out there for me. Remember to hit the like button and subscribe to see other videos that I make, and thanks for watching.